A Tennessee community is shocked when a beloved elderly woman vanishes. As investigators search, the mystery of her disappearance deepens. The truth begins to emerge, but slowly and in unexpected directions. As police and the FBI try to help a troubled small town find their dear friend.
In 1992, a woman disappeared from her Memphis home. When the ransom went uncollected, the FBI suspected a desperate amateur and feared the worst. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. As the search for the woman progressed, investigators uncovered a web of lies and false accusations designed to hide the real perpetrator.
Memphis, Tennessee. On August 7th, 1992, 25 miles outside the city in the small town of Eads, successful land developer Alan Roberts arrived home from work. As usual, his wife's car was in the driveway, but he was surprised to find the mail there.
Doe?
His wife, Doe Roberts, usually left a note when she went out, but there was none.
Doe?
In the kitchen, Alan spotted Doe's asthma medication on the counter. She always took the inhaler when she went out. He called their closest friends nearby.
Bill? Yeah, Bill, this is Alan. Have you seen Doe today? Has she been over there?
No one he spoke to had heard from Doe.
Still not here. I'm a little bit worried, okay? I'll tell you what, I'm gonna go look around the property for her. You do me a favor, call around, see if you can find her, okay? Hello?
Roberts worried she might have had an asthma attack while working in the garden. He searched the grounds of their farm. No sign of Doe.
Doe? Doe?
He was about to call the police when his telephone rang.
Hello, Doe?
It was a man speaking with an Asian accent.
You have Doe? What do you mean you have Doe? What do you want?
The caller demanded a $100,000 ransom for Doe's safe return.
Not a problem. I can take care of it. It'll take me a little time. You just let me know what you want me to do, and I'll do it, okay?
But he didn't explain where to take the money.
Where do you want me to take it?
Before he hung up.
Hello?
Stunned, Alan immediately called the Shelby County Sheriff's Department and told them about his wife's disappearance and the ransom call he received. A team of deputies and sheriff's inspectors responded to the house. Roberts told them he did not recognize the voice of the caller and did not know anyone who would want to harm Doe.
I came back home then about 7:30, 8 o'clock.
As the interview continued, agents from the FBI's Memphis field office arrived. Eads is about 30 miles from both the Arkansas and Mississippi borders. If someone took Doe across state lines, the FBI would take the lead, since transporting a victim state to state is a federal crime. Roberts explained he last saw his wife that morning.
So you're planning on working in the
They had
garden
eaten
today?
breakfast together, as they had every morning for 43 years.
Yes, I am. I hope it's not too hot to work.
At 10, Alan left to meet a prospective out-of-town buyer for a property he was developing.
See you later.
All right, have a good day.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
The buyer, a man named Sam Wagner, had called the day before, making an appointment to see the property at 10:30 that morning.
Morning, Todd.
Robert said he waited for over an hour, but Sam Wagner never showed.
Seemed like
He spent the rest of the afternoon laying sod at another of his development properties.
Sure, yeah. If you want to. Okay, want to come in this way? Let's do that.
The investigators needed to check the house for evidence. Robert showed them Doe's asthma inhaler and said if she suffered a serious attack without it, she could die.
She's got a serious killer, so
They needed to find her immediately.
never should have that, so.
Looking for signs of forced entry, deputies checked doors and windows. Nothing appeared suspicious.
Is it locked?
Knowing that people sometimes run off voluntarily, faking abductions to cover themselves, deputies checked Doe's bedroom. Her suitcases and all of her clothing were still there, as were her valuables. It didn't seem like she left on her own. If someone had abducted her, one clue suggested it happened outside, according to FBI Special Agent Joanne Overall.
Alan Roberts located mail halfway into the garage, and it was not taken into the house. He suspected that his wife had gone to the mailbox and never made it back into the house, and she had laid the mail down at that point.
Beginning at the driveway, deputies formed search lines, fanning out in a grid pattern to scour the 150-acre farm for any sign of the 65-year-old woman or what happened to her. Despite the efforts of multiple search teams, they found nothing. The best chance for a new lead would be additional ransom calls.
Got this hooked up. When he called,
We began monitoring Alan Roberts' phone right after the kidnapping. With his consent, we placed a recorder on his phone should he get a call from the kidnapper.
and does recording when the phone rings.
They also installed tracing equipment.
Leave it down the whole time you're talking. When you finish, push the
If the man with the Asian accent called again, the FBI would be ready. Later that night, the phone rang.
Hello? Yes?
It was coming from a nearby payphone.
No, just don't hurt her. I'll do whatever you want.
Deputies headed toward the source of the call.
Okay,
It sounded like the same man who called earlier.
okay.
He
sure,
said
okay.
Doe was safe, for now, and he knew law enforcement was listening. Robert said the caller ordered him to remove the tape of their conversation and crush it in the driveway.
He wants me to take it outside and smash it. He said he's gonna watch
They
it.
quickly switched it with a blank tape.
All right, go out there and crush it, and I'll watch it.
Oh, okay.
At that time, no surveillance officers were outside. When Shelby County deputies arrived at the payphone, it was clear. Whoever made the call was gone. By daybreak, investigators expanded their search into the Eads community, asking friends and neighbors when they last saw Doe and if they noticed anything unusual on the day of her disappearance.
Doe and Alan Roberts.
Yeah, sure. They live right over there.
No one recalled seeing or hearing from her that day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yes, sir.
One neighbor told investigators that at church that week, there seemed to be tension between Doe and Alan, but no solid clues emerged. Word of the kidnapping spread, and news stations picked up the story. Joe Birch of WMC-TV in Memphis reported on the small community's reaction to Doe's disappearance.
a lot of people felt it must have been someone from the outside who committed this crime. Because these people worshiped together, they went to square dances together, they spent a lot of their time together, and their focus was their little community and staying away from downtown Memphis and all the danger that might be here. So I think the people in the Eads community felt like an outsider probably committed this crime.
But investigators wondered how, in a place like Eads, a stranger wasn't noticed. As the investigation's first full day drew to a close, Special Agent Overall's concern grew. The 24 hours immediately following a kidnapping are critical. As more time passes, the chances of finding the victim alive diminish rapidly. On the second day, community members gathered to show their support and offer prayers for Doe's safe return. While the town of Eads prayed, investigators turned their attention to the most likely suspect.
In a case like this, we always look at the family members and relatives, people that are closest to the victim first, and then work the circle outwards.
They needed to start with the husband, Alan Roberts. It was possible he had harmed Doe, then used an accomplice to make the ransom calls. It is always difficult when family members realize they are suspects. Authorities had to ask the worried husband to take a polygraph test. It was an unexpected request, but Alan agreed. A polygraph measures a subject's physiological reactions while answering questions. The subject reviews all of the questions before the test, so there are no surprises. Though commonly called a lie detector test, a polygraph does not actually detect lies. It only detects whether the subject is exhibiting the characteristics most people exhibit when lying: spikes in heart rate, perspiration, blood pressure, and respiration.
Are you convinced that I will only ask you questions that we've gone over before?
While polygraph results are rarely admissible in court, many investigators find they point them in the right direction.
Is your first name Alan?
The examiner asked Roberts questions unrelated to the case to establish a baseline for truthful responses. Then he asked questions about his relationship with Doe and the events of the day she disappeared.
Did you kill Doe Roberts?
The examiner then interpreted the graphic output to determine if Roberts appeared to be deceptive on the questions about the case.
All right.
In his opinion, Alan Roberts answered all of the questions truthfully.
You passed?
Alan was sure this was the end of it. But agents knew that test results were not always accurate.
No, you're telling the truth. You're kidding me.
They could not eliminate him yet. To check Roberts' story, the FBI wanted to find Sam Wagner, the man he allegedly went to meet on the morning of Doe's abduction.
We thought Sam Wagner may have come into this area, and because of their financial backings and holdings, that he may have kidnapped Doe Roberts for the money that they had, because they had a substantial amount of money.
Agents checked FBI databases and nationwide DMV records, searching for anyone named Sam Wagner. In several states, FBI agents interviewed men of that name, but eliminated each as a suspect.
Alan Roberts' story became more suspicious when Sam Wagner became an unknown individual that we couldn't locate, and it became more apparent to us that Alan Roberts could possibly be behind the kidnapping.
Looks like he checks out. I don't think he's got anything.
If Alan did do something to his wife, perhaps the couple's phone records and banking statements would reveal a clue.
nothing unusual about any of the phone calls.
Yet investigators uncovered only evidence of a normal life spent in a small town,
He's been in a checking account.
with no sign of contact with anyone suspicious, and no record of Doe spending money after August 7th. No leads were panning out. Eventually, they came to believe Doe Roberts was dead.
After approximately 2 to 3 weeks of being unable to locate the victim, it was more than likely going to end up being a homicide. I requested through my supervisor that we bring in Shelby County Sheriff's Department into the investigation to make it a joint investigation.
If it were a murder, it would be prosecuted in state court. The team returned to the Roberts house.
The second search of Alan Roberts' property was done more in a forensic frame of mind, and we were looking for blood spatterings in the house as well as in the barn.
Again, Roberts cooperated. He would do anything. Forensics technicians from the FBI and the Sheriff's Department processed the buildings, looking for any evidence of a murder, cleanup, or disposal of a body. They also gathered hairs and carpet fibers from Alan's truck to compare to any evidence recovered later. The painstaking search lasted 2 full days. Alan Roberts grew more frustrated that law enforcement had to devote so much time to him as a suspect. He was wearing down, and the real kidnapper was out there, somewhere. In 1992, the Shelby County Sheriff's Department and the Memphis FBI searched Alan Roberts' farm and its buildings for any sign of his wife's possible murder. Roberts had passed a polygraph, and now none of the items on his property tested positive for blood. Yet no other suspects emerged, and investigators had developed circumstantial evidence that implicated Roberts. Although several witnesses had seen Roberts that day, his confirmed alibi only accounted for about 5 hours. Authorities knew that left plenty of time to get rid of a body. Also, some members of the Eads community gave statements claiming Alan Roberts had acted in a suspicious manner following Doe's disappearance, according to Special Agent Joanne Overall.
People within the community felt he did not openly grieve for the loss of his wife. He was socializing shortly after her kidnapping, that both him and his wife were members of a square dancing group, and within a couple of weeks, Alan was back at the square dancing group with various partners.
News anchor Joe Birch observed Roberts' lack of emotion during media coverage.
When somebody's wife disappears, you'd expect to see a level of emotion, and we just didn't see it from Alan Roberts. He was just kind of calm, cool, and collected, and very direct, and there wasn't a lot of teary-eyed, emotional appeals that we see a lot in kidnapping cases.
Investigators kept watching Roberts as he tried to carry on with his life, struggling with the frustration of not knowing where his wife was and being the only suspect in her disappearance. Yet they saw nothing that led them to Doe Roberts. In September, the man with the Asian accent resurfaced, now saying Alan was involved.
Hello? The kidnapper began calling people in the Eads community, stating that Doe Roberts was still alive. Many of the phone calls indicated Alan was part of the scheme to kidnap his wife. It was extremely frustrating because he never gave specific points to drop money.
Several of the people who talked to the kidnapper had caller IDs on their phones, so agents traced the calls to phone booths on a well-traveled road.
We would go to the phone booths immediately, and of course, the individual who was making the phone call was already gone. Other people had already used the phone. We would check the phones for possible fingerprints, and there was just never any evidence to tie an individual to that phone.
Okay. Here?
Each of the calls were made within a few miles of the Roberts house, a significant risk in a small community buzzing about the case. This boldness suggested that the caller was an insider, familiar enough to be inconspicuous in public, and that he considered himself beyond the reach of investigators. Desperate for something solid, Alan Roberts took things into his own hands, offering a reward for Doe's safe return, and announcing he disconnected the FBI's recording and tracing equipment from his phone so the kidnapper could call freely. On October 8, 1992, 2 months after Doe disappeared, the kidnapper called Alan Roberts again.
Is she okay?
He told him to drive to a payphone at a country store a mile away. Now. Roberts hurried to the store. Once again, he was on his own, with no corroborating witness to prove what was happening. The phone was already ringing when he arrived. He hoped, finally, this would be his chance to get his wife back.
Hello?
2 months after someone abducted 65-year-old Doe Roberts, the kidnapper ordered her husband, Alan Roberts, to a payphone.
Hello? Hello?
The man with the Asian accent said Doe was alive and still with him.
That's my wife's birthday.
He asked Roberts for the name of an intermediary, someone Alan trusted that the kidnapper could contact.
Somebody at the church? What do you mean, somebody at the church?
Roberts suggested Charles Lord, a leading church member and friend of the family. The caller said he would be in touch about where to bring the ransom money.
Can I talk to Doe? Please, let me talk to Doe. What? Hello?
Then he hung up.
Well, they've been good neighbors.
Charles Lord, the man Roberts picked to be his intermediary, was a civil servant and treasurer of the local church. He made a public appeal to the kidnapper on Alan Roberts' behalf, asking the man to call him and finally give specific instructions for a ransom drop.
Call my number, and I'll line up how to get.
They all wanted to get Doe back.
There you go.
More calls from the kidnapper came to Charles Lord and others in the community, but still no details for an exchange. In November 1992, Charles Lord called investigators to his home. Special Agent Joanne Overall hoped they finally had a direct link to the kidnapper.
Charles Lord stated that late in the evening, he heard a car out on his cove. He walked down to the mailbox, and there was a letter placed in his mailbox, which was a kidnapping ransom letter.
Investigators were glad to have physical evidence. Fingerprints, hairs of fibers on the letter might provide a link to the kidnapper. But by the time they got to it, they found the evidence tainted.
Charles Lord took this letter and showed it to several people before we were called in and obtained the letter. So there was quite a few fingerprints on the letter before we got it.
Lab examiners checked all of the prints, determining they belonged to Lord and the people he let handle the letter. Nothing to lead them to the kidnapper. The message was no help either. The ransom had been lowered, but still, no instructions for a drop. It seemed the kidnapper was playing games with them. In case he contacted Lord again, agents set a trap.
Our office set up surveillance on his mailbox, using a hidden camera, which was literally placed in a birdhouse close to the mailbox.
Yeah, it looks pretty good. Go ahead and tilt it up.
Okay, now, let's get back off so that it's-
If the kidnapper dropped off another note, they'd have him on tape. Agents also installed wiretap and recording devices on Lord's telephone.
Basically what you do every time the phone rings, you just hit the play button.
They still had no real evidence against Alan Roberts. But a new suspect was developing.
Yes, sir. Come on in.
Charles Lord began taking an active role in the investigation, often stopping by the sheriff's office to check on their progress.
The Roberts, Doe Roberts? Yes, sir.
The deputies became suspicious.
Wanted to come by and
He seemed too interested.
or anything.
What is it?
Their suspicion deepened because of the peculiar nature of the phone calls he claimed he got from the kidnapper.
Interview some witnesses.
Charles Lord stated he received several phone calls from the kidnapper. He did say that he talked with Doe Roberts, which was unusual because none of the other callers talked with Doe Roberts.
I appreciate it.
But agents never got tapes of the calls.
Really suspicious of the guy.
But every time he received a telephone call, it appeared that our equipment didn't work.
Over the next week, Lord reported another ransom letter and one of Doe's scarves placed in his mailbox. Agents recovered no evidence from the items, but hoped their camera captured images of the kidnapper. They had plenty of the regular mail carrier. But when the tape got to where the kidnapper should appear, it went blank.
When the equipment that was placed at Charles Lord's residence continued to fail, I just thought we had poor equipment. And eventually, it became apparent that somebody was tampering with it.
Agents suspected the interference came from Charles Lord. Then the victim's husband, Alan Roberts, reported a strange encounter with Lord. He said the night before, at the Eads Community Center, Lord summoned him to a private meeting. Alan was surprised when his friend offered to help get Doe back for a price.
Alan Roberts told me that Charles Lord had advised that he had underworld contacts and that there was information available if Charles could get some money to pay for it. Also, Alan advised at that time that Charles Lord was wearing a gun.
It was clear Lord was somehow involved. But investigators needed more than suspicion. They needed evidence. On March 4th, 1993, 7 months after Doe disappeared, there was another twist in the case.
Can we help you?
Memphis news anchor Joe Birch received a call at his office.
Yes. I've never recorded a telephone conversation before, but I decided that I would record this conversation.
Where is Doe Roberts right now?
The call set off a trigger in my mind that this could be the same individual who's been making the anonymous calls in the Doe Roberts case, and I tried to get the man to stay on the line for as long as he would stay.
As Birch spoke to the man with the Asian accent, he tried to elicit details as to who the caller was and what happened to Doe. When Birch tried to set up a ransom drop, the caller hung up.
Hello? Hello? I took the tape directly into my boss's office. We immediately called the FBI and the Shelby County Sheriff's Department.
What can you tell us about Doe Roberts?
Investigators agreed to WMC-TV airing the tape, hoping it might flush the kidnapper out.
Joe Birch,
It worked.
Action News 5. Can we help you?
The kidnapper called back. He was angry they aired the tape and demanded no more coverage. But this time, Joe Birch got him to do what no one else had.
Where
arrange a ransom drop. Agents and sheriff's inspectors staked out the drop location, ready to grab the caller who had eluded them for so long.
Is that her?
That's her.
You could be positive.
Yeah.
As instructed, a reporter from WMC-TV drove to the spot with $80,000 in cash.
It's her, but I didn't see anybody else. Do you see anybody else?
Everyone waited, hoping.
Sit tight. Sit tight. We may have somebody else. They may be waiting. Contact. We are
But the kidnapper never showed.
She's leaving.
Okay. It didn't happen.
One more disappointment in a frustrating investigation.
1409, be advised. Subject has just left. No contact. Show us going ahead and clearing the scene.
Other deputies observed Charles Lord was home the entire time. Weeks passed with no movement on the case. Then, in June 1993, the kidnapper arranged another drop. He called two of Doe's nephews and told them to bring the ransom money to a local motel. Soon, the elusive kidnapper finally would surface. In June 1993, investigators working the Doe Roberts kidnapping staked out an Eads, Tennessee motel. Special Agent Joanne Overall was part of the surveillance.
Doe Roberts' nephews received a call from the kidnapper, and they tried to make an arranged ransom drop. They were told to go to a motel room, which they did, but they also called the FBI. They were waiting to get a phone call or meet with somebody.
Other surveillance deputies had been unable to find suspect Charles Lord that night. As the team at the motel watched, a man approached. It was Lord. He went to the room the nephews had rented.
Charles Lord told the nephews of Doe Roberts that he had received a call from the kidnapper and that he was to show up there and get the money, and he would receive a phone call as to where to take the money.
But the nephews wouldn't give him the cash. They said they wanted to deal with the kidnapper directly. Investigators were sure that was exactly who they were dealing with.
He is the only individual who had received a telephone call stating that he had talked with Doe Roberts, and now he was meeting with somebody to pick up money, but we did not have enough evidence at that time to go forward with an arrest.
They did, however, increase their focus on Lord. To look for a financial motive to the kidnapping, the FBI subpoenaed Lord's bank records.
I spoke earlier on the phone.
We went through records trying to determine if he had loans out, what his financial holdings were, and it became apparent that Charles Lord owed a lot of money to several banks in town, substantial amounts of money, and that he was unable to meet the payments and that he had filed for bankruptcy.
That circumstantial evidence allowed investigators to secure a search warrant for Lord's house. In late June 1993, they served the warrant, which allowed them to look for and seize any financial documents. Some of the files they recovered revealed Lord's criminal past.
He had embezzled over $150,000 from the Memphis depot, where he had retired several years prior, and he had embezzled approximately $70,000 from the church there in Eads, where he was attending.
As treasurer of the church, Lord had access to the parish bank accounts and cash donations. Despite the find, investigators still had no direct evidence of the abduction.
We had nothing that we could use to charge him with the kidnapping and the murder of Doe Roberts. It was important to obtain a confession from Charles Lord because we had no body.
Good, maybe this will help us out a little.
One agent working the case was trained in criminal profiling.
He wants some more attention.
Analyzing Lord's actions, he offered a behavioral profile to help get the confession.
We got all these files. Is he gonna repeat his
He suggested Lord was a manipulative, pathological liar who believed he was untouchable.
It's gonna help us out, but I don't know if it's gonna...
The agent felt that overwhelming the suspect's ego was the only way to beat him.
What you guys need to do is let
The
him...
plan was to bring Lord in for an interview and let him see what he would take to be evidence of a massive investigation against him for months.
push into his confessing.
Agents created numerous evidence boxes, hoping to trump Lord's belief he was above the investigation. Then, on August 25, 1993, at the FBI's Memphis field office, investigators met with Lord and his attorney.
I got some questions about... Do you know anything about Mrs. Doe Roberts?
As Charles Lord sat in that room during the interview, I was watching him look at these boxes, realizing that he had been under surveillance for a lot longer than he had anticipated, and he became very nervous.
The FBI's tactics appeared to be working. Lord eventually admitted to making some of the ransom calls. He said he did it to keep the investigation alive for Doe's sake, but denied any involvement in her abduction. Sensing that he was ready to crack, the investigators offered him a deal.
Charles Lord was told by our office, as well as the Shelby County inspector, that if he would take a polygraph and pass a polygraph, we would not look at him any further for the Doe Roberts kidnapping. However, if he failed the polygraph, his attorney and Charles Lord agreed to a further interrogation in reference to the kidnapping.
He agreed. After asking control questions to gauge Lord's truthful response levels, the polygraph examiner asked about Doe, including whether Lord was involved in her abduction.
Did you harm Doe Roberts?
In the end, the examiner believed the polygraph results showed Lord being deceptive. Though the results could not be used in court, they meant authorities could continue questioning the suspect. With Lord's attorney present in the interrogation room, FBI agents and inspectors from the Shelby County Sheriff's Department pressed the suspect, returning again and again to the polygraph results.
I've got every piece of evidence I need, what I need you to do.
At first, he continued to deny involvement, but after several hours, the interview tactics wore him down. Lord said he was ready to tell them what happened. He said he needed cash to pay back his loans and cover the money he stole from the church, and decided to kidnap Doe for ransom. On August 6, 1992, he called the Roberts, posing as a property buyer named Sam Wagner, and arranged to meet Alan. The next day, when he knew Alan was waiting at the development property, he drove by their house. Doe was bringing in the mail.
Doe, there's been an accident.
He knew she would trust him.
Alan's been involved in an accident. Yeah, get in the car and I'll take you to him.
What happened? Do you know? Is he all right?
Lord told investigators he planned to release Doe after he got the ransom, but she suffered a fatal heart attack in his car. He said he panicked and dumped her body and her purse, but he would not say where.
Would you be willing to take us to where she is?
The investigators believed he was lying, at least about planning to release Doe, and perhaps about other details.
You did what you were supposed to do.
Special Agent Joanne Overall knew they had to find the body to check his story. They offered a deal.
Charles Lord agreed to tell us where Doe Roberts' body was after he had confessed to the kidnapping in exchange for Shelby County not pursuing the death penalty.
Lord claimed he dumped her in the Wolf River, a slow-moving river that runs 90 miles across the southwest corner of the state. The Wolf River empties into the Mississippi at Memphis. Lord said he dumped the remains from a bridge in Fayette County, 13 miles from the Roberts' home. Divers would begin 50 yards upriver, searching for the body and purse. Lieutenant John Yancey of the Shelby County Sheriff's Department led the dive in the murky river.
We had 21 divers involved total. The visibility in the river was 0. It was total black water.
And in the dark water, several species of venomous snakes. Adding to the challenge was the fact that the crime took place a year earlier. Any remains would be scattered and difficult to find. FBI agents and sheriff's deputies helped the divers by stretching a rope across the river's width. Divers held onto the rope and moved across its length, searching the river bottom by hand.
Normally you do an arm span, arm over arm for a search for a body because it's large. But we were looking for contents of the purse at the time to try to make sure that this was actually the scene. So we had to bring it down to where we were, instead of doing the large arm spans, we were having to do what I call this the hand grab. And that's where you just get the dirt with your hand. And that way you're able to find everything on the bottom.
Once the divers reached the other bank, the team would move the rope a foot downriver and start over. Anytime a diver found something, he signaled, and additional divers came in to mark and extract the item.
We found a safe that had been taken in a robbery of a cleaner's, and the money had fallen out of the safe, and we found the pennies on the bottom and the dollar bills, but we found no contents of any of her purse. So I feel like if we'd have found pennies on the bottom, we would have found her makeup or a wallet or IDs or anything times back to her.
In 110-degree heat, the team continued their search of every square inch.
On my second day, I was on the bridge, and an elderly lady walked up to me and said, "I want you to do me a favor." And I said, "I'll try to if I can." She said, "I want you to find us something today so we can get this over with, so we can go ahead and bury Doe and get this case over with."
After 3 full days, they had searched a half-mile of the river. They believed the body would not have gone farther than that in the lowland waters.
I went to my boss, my chief, and I told him, I said, based on my experience and what we have done, she's not in here. But if you want us to continue to search, we'll search till it runs into Mississippi. Ever how you want to do it. But I can tell you right now, she's not here.
Investigators were convinced Lord had lied to them, unnecessarily placing the dive team in danger. Special Agent Overall confronted Lord.
We took Charles Lord out to the site and explained to him that these divers were putting their lives in jeopardy and we needed to find the body, and it didn't appear that the body was there.
The suspect had run out of lies. Now he was ready to tell investigators what really happened to Doe Roberts. After a 3-day search of Tennessee's Wolf River, dive leader Lieutenant John Yancey believed the remains of kidnapping victim Doe Roberts were not in the river.
We had searched everywhere possible, and just over the years of experience, I would have found something by now, either some bones, some makeup, or something. I said, based on my experience, she's not in here. There the divers are, she's not there.
Investigators confronted suspect Charles Lord.
The deal's gonna come off the table.
Realizing they would not give up until they got the truth, Lord admitted Doe had not died of a heart attack in his car. He said he took her to his house and tied her up in a room above the garage. He could never let his neighbor go, now. He tried to kill her with sleeping pills. When that didn't work, he smothered her with a pillow. Lord said he buried her in his backyard compost heap. On top of the body, he placed a layer of lime, then concrete, hoping they would hasten decomposition. They needed to determine if Lord was telling the truth this time, to retrieve evidence and give Doe's family the closure of knowing what happened.
Stand by.
The sheriff's department called in forensic anthropologists from the University of Tennessee. After removing layers of leaves and compost, they began the dig. Shelby County Sheriff's Lieutenant Ronald Goodwin supervised the meticulous excavation.
It's just using brushes and little trowels, much like uncovering artifacts. And it's one spoonful at a time to make sure that you don't miss any evidence and make sure you don't do anything to harm what evidence may be with the body.
After 2 hours, they pierced a shell of concrete and lime. In the space underneath, a body.
Well, the first thing that we came to was a hand. The rest of the body was laying flat in the grave site on its back, face up.
It took 17 hours to completely exhume the remains, and what investigators found surprised them.
The skin was intact. The body was in such good condition, I felt like the many scientific tests that we could run might reveal. It's poisoning, cause of death, sexual attack, or whatever. It appeared that the actions that Mr. Lord had taken, such as the lime and so forth on top of the body, had worked in reverse, and it had preserved the body for us.
The most chilling detail was the position of the 65-year-old woman's hand.
The only thing that was out of normal position was the hand, which was up in front of her face in a defensive position with a finger spread.
It appeared to investigators she might not have been dead when she was buried.
Maybe she was still alive. Maybe she was pushing up with her hand.
Over a year after Doe Roberts disappeared, the FBI and Alan Roberts had their evidence. On October 19, 1993, Charles Lord pled guilty to first-degree murder and kidnapping. He was sentenced to life plus 25 years. Doe's husband, Alan, had endured being a suspect for months. Now, with the truth out, he could finally lay Doe to rest. But one challenge remains for Alan Roberts.
It's an uneven closure. I'm trying to forget about Charles Lord, and I'm praying that God will let me forgive him. I'm praying that Doe is in God's hands right now.
Mr. and Mrs. Roberts enjoyed 43 years of marriage before they were torn apart. He has faith that one day he will see her again. In the 1990s, the disguised serial bank robber terrorizes the Chicago area. Expert with weapons, aware of police procedure, and fearless, he hits hard and disappears fast. Police and the FBI realize the only way to stop him is to catch him in the act. But his desperate violence proves impossible to predict.
The average bank robbery yields roughly $3,000. Yet some criminals risk everything for the take. In suburban Chicago, a disguised gunman began a series of robberies, growing more violent with each one. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Tracking the robber's movements, agents discovered he wasn't alone and would do anything to avoid capture.
March 5th, 1990. Chicago, Illinois.
$1,000?
At a bank on the city's south side, employees began what they thought was a normal workday. The neighborhood was quiet until 10 a.m.
Don't you touch that alarm!
The disguised gunman threatened to kill anyone who didn't follow his orders. The tellers knew not to interfere. It was over in seconds. When they were safe, they called police.
Yes, we just...
The Chicago police patrol officers closest to the bank responded first.
Walked up, got in my face.
The witnesses reported that the robber was a white male, about 6 feet tall.
I was just putting the money up.
But they didn't see details of his features because of his disguise. He wore gloves and carried a police scanner. The man was aggressive, handling his semi-automatic handgun with confidence. He left no fingerprints, and security cameras revealed no other immediate clues. Police canvassed the area, hoping to find other witnesses. A woman who lived near the bank reported that she thought she had seen the robber. She said that at about the time of the robbery, she saw a man who seemed to be wearing a fake beard get into a small 4-door sedan. She did not get the plates, but she did give officers a description of the car. Checking every similar car in the area, they soon found one they believed was the robber's getaway vehicle, abandoned a few blocks from the bank. The officer approached with caution, in case someone was still inside. But it was empty, except for a paper towel covering the broken ignition. A records check revealed the car had been stolen from a mall parking lot 4 days earlier. Later processing produced no leads to the robber. Bank robbery is a federal offense, so police contacted the Chicago FBI.
Hi, this is Keith.
Supervisory Senior Resident Agent Bill Keefe had handled dozens of bank robbery calls.
At that time, we were extremely busy with bank robberies. We had 2 on one day. We were running sometimes as many as 3 robberies a week.
Most were committed by amateurs who went in without a plan and were caught quickly.
And as I said, Shoemaker's already over here.
But when the bank robbery squad reviewed the reports on the South Side robbery, they noted how clean the assault was, obviously well planned. They believed it was not the bearded assailant's first robbery and would not be his last. 2 months later, the robber with the fake beard hit a bank in the suburb of Libertyville.
Give me another drawer.
Not satisfied with cash drawers this time, he ordered a teller to open the vault.
Don't you try anything. Come on, let's go.
He said his police scanner would let him know if anyone hit the silent alarm.
From the vault. Put it in there. Come on.
the robber escaped with thousands of dollars in cash. But this time, a teller got the license plate number from his getaway car. While Libertyville police looked for the car, Chicago FBI agents interviewed the tellers. Special Agent Hank Schmidt learned the gunman was more aggressive this time.
He controlled people with the weapon. He would intimidate them by putting the gun up towards their face. He pointed the gun directly at someone when he talked to them, which was intimidating to the tellers and the customers.
Although interviews yielded no clues, police did find the getaway car, abandoned a few blocks from the bank. Again, the vehicle had been stolen from a mall 3 days earlier. And as before, the thief used a towel to hide the broken ignition. FBI Special Agent Dave Childrey was part of the robbery squad. The squad uncovered an earlier robbery in Wilmette, Illinois, believed to be committed by the same man. One surveillance camera photo provided a frightening clue.
There was a very good picture of the robber taken in which he was using what we call a weaver stance. This is a shooting position taught to police officers. It was taught to FBI agents, and if you have been taught to shoot like that, you recognize it. This person might have had some law enforcement training.
If so, he would know how these investigations work, and he could prove very difficult to catch. The local press dubbed him the Bearded Bandit. Investigators took advantage of the coverage to ask citizens for help. They published enhanced stills from the robberies, hoping someone would recognize him despite the disguise.
We put his picture on the news. He did wear a beard, a fake beard, and mustache, and a ball cap. So after running those pictures, we were not getting any tips from the public.
In November 1990, the elusive bandit hit a bank in Wheeling, Illinois. A teller hit the alarm before he was told not to. Over his scanner, the gunman heard the police responding.
He didn't leave the bank, which would be the normal reaction of bank robbers. They're there to rob the bank. They're not there to get involved in a shootout with the police. He stayed in the bank while the police were responding and held the gun up to the cashier and counted down from 10.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
It seemed he knew how long he had before police responded. More evidence he might be a cop.
He started moving further.
As the robberies continued, it looked like the bandit purposely chose targets in different jurisdictions to complicate the investigation.
No bank was ever hit the second time. The robberies would be on the other end of the suburban area against Lake Michigan, and then they would be out in Schaumburg or Elk Grove Village or up north in Lake County, such as Libertyville.
As he struck in new suburbs, the FBI had to coordinate with a growing number of police departments. Palatine, Illinois Police Chief John Kozel, a detective sergeant at the time, learned of the case and that the bandits' getaway cars belonged to shopping mall employees, stolen at the beginning of their shifts.
He would steal one of the employee cars knowing that it would not be reported stolen for approximately 8 hours. So he knew he had 8 hours to get the vehicle to where he needed to put it before anyone would even discover it missing and it would become hot on the system.
When dumping the cars, the robber did his best to interfere with the ongoing investigation, wiping them clean of fingerprints and leaving no trace of himself behind.
It was very apparent that he was aware of evidence-gathering techniques, of police methods.
In the end, agents found nothing of evidentiary value in any of the cars. Since the cars didn't help identify the bandit, investigators followed every conceivable lead that might. They visited theatrical shops around the city, hoping a salesperson might recognize the man with the fake beard as a customer. Again, nothing. The bearded bandit committed 7 armed bank robberies in the Chicago area between January 1990 and February 1991. Then, the robberies stopped.
We went over what we had done to that point in time, looked for things we might have missed. Maybe he'd been incarcerated somewhere. Maybe he'd moved out of state. Maybe he was dead. We just didn't know.
The bandit's trail stayed cold for 9 months. On November 4th, 1991, Palatine police officer Kevin Maher was working the day shift. A dispatcher in training rode along to learn procedure.
I was heading southbound on Quinton Road when I saw a vehicle heading northbound, and I looked in my side view mirror and I thought what I saw was an expired tag. So I made a U-turn and I was telling my ride-along that we were gonna go up and see if this vehicle had expired plates, and if it did, I would conduct a traffic stop and show him how we conduct a traffic stop and how we punch all the numbers into the computer.
It was supposed to be a routine stop.
The person driving the vehicle swerved over to the side of the road and jammed on the brakes. He's got a gun.
Maher's first instinct was to protect his passenger. The bearded bandit was back. In November 1991, a routine Chicago area traffic stop erupted in violence when a man shot Palatine police officer Kevin Maher.
I was in a state of shock because it was broad daylight, it was 11 o'clock, and it was a quiet residential street, and it was a basic ambush. And after he fired the first round came through the windshield and struck me in the shoulder, and glass from the windshield struck me in the left ear.
Get in for your location.
I'm at Smith and Euclid. Smith and Euclid down in my feet. I've been hit. I need an ambulance.
Units officer down.
The officer down call went out on the Illinois State Police Emergency Radio Network.
8144, shoppers en route with their canine.
From more than a dozen surrounding suburbs, police and emergency personnel rushed to the scene. Maher realized one of the shots that pierced his windshield was aimed dead center and might have hit him in the head had he not moved to protect his passenger and reversed the car.
Arlington PD is inquiring if you want any aircraft out there, helicopter or plane. 1-4 Central.
While paramedics treated Maher, officers questioned him. As a police officer, he was a perfect witness. Trained in recalling details, he gave them a description of the gunman, the car's license plates, the type of gun, and the direction in which the attacker escaped.
We got a male white, 6 foot, 200 pounds, beard, hat, last seen going south from the scene. So let's spread out, start looking for the car. Which way do you want to go, Matt? I'll go that way.
Police fanned out to find the shooter. More than 100 officers joined the search.
You guys check it out. 684485.
3 blocks from the location of the attack, police found the shooter's vehicle. It had been reported stolen from a mall parking lot 5 days earlier. Palatine Police Chief John Kozel realized the grave danger.
When someone is willing to shoot at a police officer on a routine traffic stop, we all realize that he's willing to shoot at anyone. His determination to escape is much greater than his concern for the safety of anyone. That would be a law enforcement officer, a citizen on the street. When you're willing to shoot a policeman, you're willing to shoot anyone.
Kozel helped coordinate the search for the deadly gunman.
We immediately set up a perimeter with the assistance of the state, county, and local officers in the area. We had canines on the scene. We had a chopper in the air. We notified the schools in the area to stay locked down.
Evidence technicians began to process the car. The ignition was broken, the damage covered by a paper towel. They looked for fingerprints that might help them identify the perpetrator, but found none. Canine handlers brought in their dogs, which are trained to remember a scent from a specified place, then follow only that scent, ignoring others. But the trail ended not far from the vehicle. Despite the massive effort, the suspect somehow slipped away.
Over Eastburn that we're releasing all units other than Cook County, Rolling Meadows, Arlington Heights units, and state units that are securing the perimeter.
10-4.
In addition to taking it personal when one of our officers is shot, we all know that a citizen is much more likely to be injured or killed, and we work that much harder to bring him to justice.
For more resources, they called in the FBI and Supervisory Special Agent Bill Keefe.
I was asked to come over to the Palatine Police Department by the Chief of Police. There had been a composite sketch drawn, and everybody was reviewing the circumstances of the shooting.
For nearly 2 years, Keefe and his squad had been working the Bearded Bandit case.
I had asked if we could look at the car that was found, and when I looked at the ignition, this was our bank robber.
After being treated, Officer Maher came to the station to look at surveillance photos of the Bearded Bandit. He said the bank robber did look like the man who shot him.
We surmised that he was on his way to do a bank robbery. He knew once the officer ran the plate, the car would come back stolen. He also knew that with the guns he had in his vehicle, it's not something he could conceal if the officer walked up to the vehicle.
The Bearded Bandit had made a huge leap in violence.
This guy wasn't going to go away. We were going to have to come up with a very innovative way to either identify him and charge him, or that we were going to have to catch him in the act.
Chief Kozel brought the many investigators together.
After the initial search, we set up a multi-jurisdictional task force here at our police department. We had the FBI, the state police, Cook County Sheriff's Police, and all the local agencies from our area and those involved in the Bearded Bank Robber series.
Since their suspect seemed to know police procedure, they adjusted it.
We learned we had a violent bank robber that was using a scanner. We were no longer giving out the location of the bank over the air. We were giving out a code number for each particular bank.
Robbery in progress. Go ahead and give us code.
The task force hoped patrol officers in the area could use the codes to respond to robbery calls without the bandit realizing it.
Especially you undercover agents.
Confident that the bearded bandit would resume his crime spree eventually, police began doing spot checks of banks throughout the region. On November 18th, 2 weeks after the shooting, Elk Grove Village, Illinois police officers saw nothing suspicious at one bank on their list. But later that morning, a woman leaving a nearby business did. Two people in obvious disguises entering the bank. After a police shooting in the Chicago area that was linked to the bearded bandit, the gunman reappeared in Elk Grove Village, Illinois, this time with an accomplice.
911, can I help you?
While a witness outside the bank called police,
There's something very strange going on here. Okay, thank you.
the robbers struck. The bandit demanded money from the vault, his accomplice standing guard. 911 dispatch, aware of the bearded bandit, used a prearranged code to alert officers.
2130, 2132, code green.
Without revealing information over the police scanner. They also alerted the FBI. Special Agent Hank Schmidt realized the new danger.
The big concern is that the robber, in some cases, discharges the weapon when he's using it to gesture at the employees. So the potential for violence is always there. The numbers obviously increase if we have two people that are armed.
In the bank, the manager explained they could not get into the time delay vault.
Okay, ma'am, can you hold
The
on
dispatcher instructed the witness outside to leave in case there was gunplay.
Move it!
With the money from the cash drawers, the robbers fled. Unaware the police had been called, the teller hit the alarm. Elk Grove Village officers approached with their sirens off, quietly surrounding the bank. If the robbers were still inside and heard police, they might take hostages. Officers were in even more danger, according to Palatine Chief John Kozel.
For the first time, we had two bearded individuals rob a bank. That, of course, increased our sense of urgency even more. Now we had two armed gunmen to deal with when law enforcement arrives at these banks.
2600, can you call the bank, find out if
Through the dispatcher, police talked with bank employees. The manager said the robbers had left. The officers had to be sure. The robbers could be holding a gun on the manager, forcing her to lie.
Okay, we're gonna need to have somebody from the bank step out.
The dispatcher asked them to send one employee outside to talk to police.
Tell me who that is gonna be.
She's about
The manager gave them the description of the woman chosen to go.
She's a brown necklace.
Female subject 25.
Indian descent, 5 feet tall, thin build.
2600, have the official come out. Okay, I see her coming out.
Hi, are you aware there was a bank around here?
Yes.
Is there anybody hurt inside?
The employee assured them the assailants were gone and no one was injured inside.
All right, guys, the bank is clear. Go on inside.
The officers moved in to clear the bank for certain.
One of the witnesses told us that she believed that the second person, a smaller person, was possibly a woman disguised as a man.
After the Elk Grove Village robbery, police recovered 2 cars with the bandit's signature ignition covering. It was more evidence of his criminal sophistication.
To cleanse himself after leaving the bank, he would drop the one off a block from the bank that he had just gotten into, that all the witnesses had seen him leave the bank in, and he would go a few blocks away and get into the other vehicle that he had left there previous, and then since cleanse himself from that first hot vehicle.
All of the cars were similar, according to Special Agent Dave Childry.
We were able to kind of key in the cars by the type, the make, the size, the non-visibility of them. They were just everyday cars.
He was stealing them, then letting them sit for several days before using them as getaway cars. The task force asked to be notified of similar cars stolen from area shopping malls.
We were successful in getting information on cars of that type that were stolen in the northwest suburbs and in the city of Chicago. We would put that information out on a weekly basis.
Agent Scott Backen from the FBI and Sergeant Steve Peterson from Chicago PD actually went to every roll call of approximately 50 to 60 law enforcement agencies and spoke to the individual officers on the need to find these cars. Those personal visits mean a lot more than just putting something out on a teletype.
Somewhere in the metro area, they hoped to find a getaway car after the bandit stole it, but before he used it in a robbery. Weeks later, Officer Tom Polinsky was checking an apartment building parking lot in Niles, Illinois, when he spotted a stolen car on their list. It did look like the bearded bandit's work.
The agreement was if they found one of those, and it did turn out to be stolen when they ran the license plate, that they would back off and notify us. That happened. We set up a surveillance on that vehicle.
FBI agents and Niles police officers and detectives watched from an empty apartment overlooking the stolen car, 24 hours a day.
On December 13th, we found out that the Rolling Meadows police had located another stolen car that was in all probability one of the bearded bandits' cars.
Chief Kozel was sure they were right.
These two particular vehicles were both stolen out of large mall areas. Both were owned by employees of those malls. The MO was perfect.
They set up surveillance on the second car, in Rolling Meadows, too.
Rolling Meadows PD stepped up. They shared time, detectives, intelligence, sat with our agents out there 24 hours a day.
To further ensure the bandit did not slip away, the FBI wanted to install tracking devices in the vehicles. But they couldn't do so in the parking lots. Late one night, agents removed the two cars. And replaced them with lookalikes for a few hours. It was a risky move. The thief could return at any time and spot the agents, or the decoy cars. At the FBI garage, technicians installed the remote tracking devices in each vehicle. They also equipped the cars with remote kill switches that would allow agents to shut down the engines from a distance. They put the cars back and waited. Days passed.
There was a nagging doubt in all of our minds that maybe we had been discovered, that perhaps he had seen one of us or a police officer going in and out of this apartment they were using to watch the car in Niles, that he had seen somebody near the car in Rolling Meadows, and that he was just going to back off these cars and never come back. We weren't sure. We just didn't know, but we were committed to watching these cars until something told us otherwise.
After a week, the vigil paid off. A van pulled up, and a man approached one of the cars.
This was, in my mind, a do-or-die effort. This is going to be our only shot. If we miss this, he's going to know we're onto him.
They hoped they could peacefully end the bandits' crime spree. But no one had forgotten the last time the gunman was cornered. In 1991, Chicago area investigators watched two stolen cars they believed were going to be used in the bearded bandits' next holdup. A man entered one of the cars. Special Agent Hank Schmidt believed it was their suspect.
He matched the general physical description of the person we were looking for as the bearded robber.
We have our man, we have our man.
The man had been dropped off at the vehicle by someone driving a van.
Mini wagon and a white van.
Heading southbound down the alley.
When he drove away, the van followed. Investigators could not identify either driver. They had to be careful. If the bearded bandit and his accomplice spotted a tail, they might start shooting. But FBI technicians had installed a tracking device in the car, allowing agents to follow at a distance. The suspect parked the stolen car near a suburban bank.
Mini wagon is parked. Man is behind him.
Hearing the news, Supervisory Special Agent Bill Keefe believed they finally found their target.
When that vehicle showed up in the vicinity of a bank, our adrenaline really was pumped up, and we really knew that we were going to have it.
This car was likely the first getaway car for the next day's robbery. Agents believed the two suspects would next pick up the second stolen car in Rolling Meadows.
Standing down.
They were right.
Got some stuff now. I got a male, white male.
That vehicle was also equipped with a tracking device.
Okay, the van is leaving. Red car is pulling out behind it. 10-4.
Surveillance agents followed that car, believed to be a secondary getaway car, to a hardware store about 20 miles from the bank where the pair left it.
Okay, looks like he's getting back into the van. All right, they're pulling out. Unit 2, go ahead and follow.
With both suspects in the van, agents no longer had the benefit of a tracking device and had to stay close. They followed the van into Hanover Park, Illinois, and watched as it pulled up to a townhouse. Now, Special Agent Dave Childry could identify the people inside.
We had a license plate and two vague descriptions of people, a man and a woman. Normal record checks on that license plate would tell us that that van belonged to Jeffrey and Jill Erickson.
The FBI and police worked through the night to learn more.
We had done a lot of research, calling police departments, trying to see who these people were. We were looking for a previous arrest record, which we didn't find. During this process, we had received some information that Jeffrey Erickson had been a police officer.
In 1986, Jeffrey Erickson worked as a patrol officer in a Chicago suburb. He distinguished himself as a skilled marksman. But he was uninterested in the everyday requirements of the job: traffic stops, paperwork. He was about to be fired when he resigned. Records also showed that Jeffrey Erickson opened a used bookstore in early 1991. During the time, the bearded bandit was on hiatus. It appeared he and his wife, Jill, a university chemistry student, led a double life, using bank robbery money to build a middle-class existence. He might not have seemed threatening on the surface, but Special Agent Schmidt knew he was.
Because he's a trained individual, he knows how we're going to react. He can plan ahead for that, and if he's trained with a weapon, he's going to be more professional in the way he handles that weapon, and he's going to be a bigger threat to us.
Investigators considered waiting until the Ericksons approached a bank the next day, but decided not to risk a shootout near employees and customers.
We had enough that we did not have to get him in the vicinity of a bank. The safest approach would be when he came to the car, the stolen car, we would arrest him.
While surveillance units watched the suspect's home, a SWAT team set up near the car in the hardware store parking lot. Police Chief John Kozel.
The SWAT team set up on the vehicles were very well aware of his background and knew that he may shoot first, and they were taking that into account.
By the morning, they were ready for the Ericksons to make their move.
About mid-morning, the surveillance units advised us that the van was in fact moving from the residence with at least 2 people. They were heading in the direction of where we were watching the stolen car. The surveillance team advised us that Mr. Erickson had got out of the vehicle in an adjoining parking lot.
He's walking away. Okay, yeah, the driver's in the van still. He's walking west.
The FBI had installed a kill switch in the stolen car, which they could use to turn off the engine from a distance.
We watched him come around the corner from that other parking lot, go to the vehicle, and enter the vehicle and start that vehicle.
Kill it.
Erickson was distracted by the car trouble.
Okay, let's go in.
The SWAT team moved in.
Out of the car! Put your hands where I can see. Get back out of that bag! Out of the car, put your hands where I can see them.
I know that the pressure of to shoot or not shoot is a split-second decision.
Get your hands up! Back in there, get out of the car.
And most law enforcement officers don't want to have to shoot an individual if they don't have to. No one wants to take a life that way. We felt like we controlled him.
Out of the car! Slowly.
After twice reaching for his bag, Erickson finally followed orders.
On the ground.
If he'd come out of the bag with a gun, it would have been an entirely different situation. I asked him as we were transporting him after the arrest to the federal lockup, you being a former police officer, you would know that a gesture like that could get you shot. And he looked at me and he said, well, I figured you'd shoot me in the head and it would be over with quickly.
In the car, agents searched Erickson's bag and found the bearded bandit's tools: loaded guns, a police scanner, gloves, a beard and a wig.
His bank robbery kit in that bag, it was very helpful to the case. Without that information or that evidence, we just arrested a car thief.
Having Jeffrey Erickson safely in custody was only half the job. In the adjoining parking lot, the SWAT team approached the van. It might be Jill Erickson inside.
You in the van!
Agents scrambled to follow. The chase barreled through 11 suburban jurisdictions, reaching speeds of 110 miles per hour. A roadblock didn't work.
And she had fired multiple rounds out of that van, either at the pursuing agents or other people in traffic. It was a big concern for the agents that she might hit an innocent civilian.
Agents shot out the rear tires of the van. But the driver was not giving up. In 1991, a suspected bank robber led police and FBI agents on a dangerous chase through the Chicago suburbs. The fleeing van turned into an area that investigators knew had no outlet. They blocked the road. As the van charged them, they had to fire. They saw movement inside. Then, an FBI agent cautiously approached. The driver was wounded, a single self-inflicted gunshot. It was Jill Erickson. Later that night, in the hospital, she died. Special Agent Hank Schmidt.
We believed it may have been a pact that they had both come up with, that they would not be arrested. She that day carried out her part of the pact, and that day he decided, for whatever reason, he didn't.
Inside the van were spent cartridge casings, blood, fibers, other ammunition, other weapons. There was a rifle with several hundred rounds of ammunition. That whole neighborhood became an evidentiary nightmare. There were bullets that Jill had fired, stuck in the side of houses, in cars, on the street.
The FBI obtained a federal search warrant for the Ericksons' home.
We found some loose cash, but what impressed me was the amount of firepower in the house. An arrest at that home would have evolved into a shootout. In that home, there was a weapon everywhere that you would find a picture or a statue or a knick-knack in any other home.
Among the weapons found was the .223 caliber semi-automatic assault rifle used in the attack on Officer Kevin Maher. Chief John Kozel realized a shootout would have been deadly to both sides.
The weapons in his home were as good as any law enforcement has as far as firepower goes. Most of the long guns he had, that type of ammunition would zip right through an officer's bulletproof vest.
Another discovery in the house spoke to the couple's mindset.
One of the things that we found quite ironic was the television was on and the VCR was on, and there was a Bonnie and Clyde tape in the VCR, and it was queued up to the point where the Bonnie and Clyde are being shot to death. in the movie, and it was obvious that that was something they watched before they went out and did their bank robberies.
Turn your head to the right.
Though one robber was dead and one in custody, the violence was not yet over. Jeffrey Erickson's trial began on July 13, 1992. The evidence compiled against him was strong.
In all conversations with the U.S. Attorney's Office, the trial was going very well. They were very upbeat about it, and the evidence was, in their mind, going to be enough to convict him.
But then, after court adjourned on July 20th, 1992, two deputy U.S. Marshals loaded Erickson and several jail inmates onto an elevator. Erickson was still dressed for court. The prisoners were headed for a van that would take them to the Metropolitan Correctional Center. By the time the elevator reached the parking garage, Erickson had somehow escaped his cuffs. Erickson shot U.S. Marshal Bill Frakes in the back and head, killing him. Ambushed, Frakes had not had time to draw his weapon. As the gunman ran for the street, court security officer and former Chicago police detective Harry Belwomany confronted him. Erickson shot the police veteran in the chest. But before Belwomany died, he got off 4 rounds, fatally wounding Erickson. The gunman was 40 feet from the crowded streets when he died.
The thing is, all these resources were brought to bear on an individual. He was captured and was being tried in court. You think the case is over, but unfortunately, the only person that could stop this individual turned out to be a very brave, courageous policeman named Harry Belwomany, who, while dying, shot and killed Jeff Erickson.
A newlywed, Bill Frakes was a promising young lawman just 9 months into his career. Harry Belwomany was a 31-year veteran. 2 of his children are also Chicago police officers, carrying on his legacy. The South Carolina house fire conceals evidence of a contract killing. When a second death is discovered, police connect the 2 incidents and suspect a group of businessmen who will kill to protect their interests and settle scores. Agents must use their own tricks and their own criminal contacts to uncover the truth and stop the cutthroat conspirators.
Murder for hire is a complex crime. Solving it means finding the killer and whoever paid for the hit. In South Carolina, a death first ruled accidental was no accident. But that was just the beginning. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Agents discovered greed, betrayal, and shady dealings, and found that sometimes family ties can strangle.
Florence County, South Carolina, lies at the heart of the state. An area where farmland meets swampland. And the working poor live side by side with the wealthiest families. Most residents of the small town of Olathe lead quiet, rural lives, 25 miles from the city of Florence. But in the late 80s, a hidden danger began to disrupt the quiet. On the morning of June 10th, 1987, the volunteers of the Olathe Rural Fire Department responded to a farmhouse fire outside of town. By the time they reached the scene, the house was engulfed in flames. It was the home of William Graham, a wealthy tobacco farmer well known in the small community. The firefighters struggled to control the flames, knowing the elderly Graham lived alone and might be inside.
That's command. Go ahead, 11C.
After 90 minutes, they finally extinguished the blaze. Investigators searched the gutted house. And in the bedroom, found Graham's body lying in his charred bed. After the body was removed, arson investigators searched for the cause of the fire. Burn patterns showed it began there in the bedroom. Chemical tests on the furniture, floor, and walls indicated that no accelerant was used to fuel the blaze. Near the fire's point of origin were several electrical outlets. The investigators believed it had been an electrical fire caused by faulty wiring in the farmhouse. They ruled the blaze accidental. At autopsy, a pathologist noted massive burn injuries and evidence of smoke in the victim's lungs. Deciding there was no need for x-rays, he concluded Graham's death was a result of asphyxiation due to carbon monoxide poisoning. County Prosecutor Dudley Salibi read about the case in the local papers.
Even though the autopsy had not indicated foul play, and even though there was no manifest evidence of arson, there were rumors throughout the Atlanta community that Mr. Graham had died as a result of foul play.
Sheriff's investigators followed up on the rumors, interviewing Graham's neighbors and friends. Some mentioned Graham had lately become paranoid about a murder plot against him. But police found nothing solid to prompt a homicide investigation. After checking every lead, the sheriff's office closed the case. Then, 7 months later, in January 1988, a hunter in nearby Clarendon County spotted a mound of dirt in a field. Checking it out, he made a grim discovery: human remains. He called police. Investigators determined the body had been placed in a grave only 10 inches deep and likely unearthed by scavenging animals. There was no evidence nearby to indicate who the victim was or how he died. The pathologist used dental records to identify the victim as Darnell Rhodes, reported missing a month earlier. Rhodes had been shot once in the back, twice in the face, and 5 times behind the left ear. A brutal murder, especially in this quiet community. At the time, no one had any reason to connect it to the farmer's fiery death 7 months earlier. The county sheriff's department wanted to bring in more resources since the violence was so extreme. So they called the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, known as SLED. Lieutenant Gary Martin, one of the investigative experts at SLED headquarters in Columbia, knew to be ready for anything.
Always expect the unexpected. Things aren't always the way they appear, and there can always be additional circumstances involving a case.
SLED agents and sheriff's detectives began by visiting area hangouts the victim, Darnell Rhodes, was known to frequent. Many knew the man and said that around the time of his disappearance, Rhodes was usually seen with a friend named Charles McCrae. The rumors were that Rhodes and McCrae were professional henchmen committing crimes for wealthy businessmen in the area. Investigators wanted to know who these men were, but no one would offer any names.
Numerous people in the Atlanta community stated that they had seen Charles McCrae with Rhodes the day before he was reported missing.
Investigators learned that after Rhodes went missing, McCrae hinted that he had killed him. To get the truth behind the rumors, investigators needed to talk to Charles McCrae. At about the same time, someone filed burglary and assault charges against McCrae that were unrelated to the Rhodes case. Clarendon County detectives decided to arrest him on those charges, hoping they could get him to talk about Rhodes.
State canon will be used against you in a court of law. The right to talk to a lawyer and have him present with you while being questioned.
At SLED headquarters, investigators explained the witness statements they had regarding McCrae discussing the murder of Rhodes.
You want to relate that to us right now?
The suspect said he might be willing to cooperate if he could protect two family members who helped him after Rhodes was dead, according to SLED agent James Gamble.
He said his nephew helped him dispose of the body and that he used his sister's automobile and that he didn't want his family being involved or accused of any part of this murder because they were not guilty. We'll do whatever we can to keep them from being involved.
When they agreed not to prosecute the others, McCrae admitted to shooting Rhodes to keep him quiet. He explained Rhodes had been talking to people about the murder of tobacco farmer William Graham.
Initially, the response from law enforcement was, no, there's no indication that that was a homicide. But then he gave them information which indicated that it was a homicide and which reopened the entire investigation.
McCrae claimed he had been hired to kill Graham and burn his house down. He said he broke into Graham's home late on the night of June 9th, 1987. McCrae found Graham asleep in the bedroom. He used a small caliber handgun, point blank behind the ear. McCrae stole the pistol Graham kept for protection. To cover the crime, he stuffed newspapers under the bed and lit them. As he left, he turned the lights on to make the growing fire less noticeable from a distance. McCrae sold both the gun he stole and the murder weapon to a friend. The agents asked who put him up to the killing. At first, he was afraid to say.
Did these two guys tell you why they wanted you to kill William Graham?
But eventually, he cracked. McCrae said it was two men, Bill Prince and Larry Marshall, business partners of Graham. Prince and Marshall hired him through an intermediary.
Hey, what's up? Okay, I got this old guy, William Graham. It's got to look like an accident. Okay, fire, I'm thinking. Yeah, I can do that. All right.
They offered him $20,000 for the hit. The agents knew of Bill Prince and Larry Marshall, prominent local businessmen, both millionaires. They also knew that if they went up against the pair before a local jury, they would need more than McCrae's word to prove a murder conspiracy. And they worried Prince and Marshall might get to McCrae and make him change his story. On April 18, 1988, 10 months after William Graham's death, agents secured a warrant to exhume the tobacco farmer's body. Law enforcement needed to look for evidence that somehow escaped them the first time, that Graham had been shot to death. X-rays taken during the second autopsy revealed 2 .32 caliber slugs in Graham's skull and a small entrance wound behind his left ear. A pathologist removed the projectiles so they could be compared to the murder weapon. Sled agents recovered the gun McCrae sold to his friend. Ballistics examiners noted similarities between the grooves etched into the slugs and those in the pistol's barrel. They determined that gun could have fired the bullets that killed Graham. More evidence implicating Charles McCrae. But investigators also needed evidence on the men who allegedly hired him. Graham's former business partners, Larry Marshall and Bill Prince. Prince's involvement with the victim went well beyond business. Graham had been his father figure.
Bill Prince had been raised by William Graham from the time he was a teenager. They became business partners, and as a result of being business partners, they took out a $500,000 insurance policy out on each other.
Prosecutor Salibi worked with the sled agents developing the insurance motive.
We found out that Mr. Prince had contacted the insurance company many times immediately after Mr. Graham's death, wanting to know how quickly he could collect the proceeds. In fact, he even volunteered to fly up to where the company was located and collect the check.
Investigators learned that Bill Prince made $500,000 off William Graham's death. Prince had also tried to control Graham's burial proceedings.
We talked with the funeral home that handled Mr. Graham's burial and found out that Mr. Prince had offered to pay for the burial if the body was going to be cremated, which of course would probably have destroyed the evidence of the projectiles that were still in his corpse.
Authorities made no effort to hide their investigation of Bill Prince and Larry Marshall, and discovered that the men had lost $400,000 to Graham in a recent lawsuit. And 2 weeks before he died, Graham had filed a second suit against them. A compelling financial motive, yet it was only circumstantial evidence against 2 millionaires not easily intimidated by the law.
No one was charged other than Mr. McCrae initially, because the only indication we had that others were involved were from Mr. McCrae. There were no corroborating witnesses, there was no physical evidence.
Then investigators' early fears were realized. The one witness they did have backed down.
Mr. McCrae soon recanted his story and refused to cooperate, so there was nothing to support what he was saying about others being involved.
Perhaps someone had gotten to McCrae and convinced him not to cooperate. In any case, investigators needed a new break in order to pursue Prince and Marshall. In December 1988, that break would emerge in a South Carolina cemetery. In 1988, South Carolina Law Enforcement Division agents investigated an arson and alleged murder for hire in the death of William Graham. When Charles McCrae confessed to the killing, he said that millionaire businessmen Bill Prince and Larry Marshall hired him for the hit. But then McCrae recanted and the investigation stalled. 8 months later, a lawyer asked sled agents to meet him in a local cemetery.
What FBI? Yes.
He said he represented a man named Fred Peachy Andrews, who had information on the case.
Is that he knows knows who killed Mr. Graham.
What situation?
He's very nervous. The first thing he wants is protection.
Sled Agent James Gamble.
The lawyer explained to us that Mr. Andrews was fearful of his life because he knew a good bit about the murder of Mr. William Graham.
The attorney said Andrews wanted to talk to authorities discreetly, so they set up a meeting. In a parking lot the next day, Fred Andrews spoke with Sled Agents James Gamble and Gary Martin. He said he used to run an illegal gambling operation out of his office, and through that operation, Bill Prince and Larry Marshall came to him about a contract killing.
They had approached Peaches to either kill or find someone to kill William Graham because they thought Peaches had all these underworld contacts because he was running these poker houses and he'd going back and forth to Las Vegas, things of that nature.
And they got some other guy.
He said Prince offered $20,000 for the hit, but later told him that Charles McCrae had been hired instead. When McCrae started talking to the cops, Larry Marshall and Bill Prince began calling Andrews, threatening him to keep quiet. Prosecutor Dudley Salibi.
He was threatened not to reveal what he knew. That had the opposite result of sending him to law enforcement.
Andrews agreed to help get more evidence against Prince and Marshall and set up a tape recorder on his home phone. If the men called again, he would be ready. It wasn't long before Bill Prince did call.
You know who this is?
Once again, Prince brought up the Graham investigation. He said he heard Andrews was talking to Sled, and he and Larry Marshall needed to be sure he wasn't ratting on them. But this time, it was caught on tape.
That kind of talk can get a person killed.
Bill Prince stated to Fred Andrews that if it's true what I hear that you're saying to law enforcement, a lot of people could get hurt. To me, that implied that for his own safety, he should not cooperate with law enforcement.
It appeared Prince was willing to kill his father figure for money and any witness against him to keep them quiet. Sled agents and prosecutors put together their case against Prince and Marshall. They had the original statement of the alleged hitman Charles McCrae, physical proof that Graham had been shot to death, the statement of Fred Andrews that Prince and Marshall ordered the murder, and the tapes of calls threatening Andrews not to cooperate with police in the investigation.
We gathered all the information that we could. We went to the Florence County Grand Jury, presented the case, and they were indicted for the death of William Graham.
Investigators secured arrest warrants for the two businessmen. On April 6, 1989, deputies and agents arrested Bill Prince outside a real estate office. He was charged with solicitation of murder, conspiracy, and accessory before the fact of murder. When Larry Marshall heard of Prince's arrest, he tried to run.
Sir, can you step out of the car, please? What's this all about, officer?
But another arrest team found him driving out of town. They arrested him on the same charges in connection with Graham's murder. On May 6, 1991, at the Florence County Courthouse, the trial of Bill Prince, Charles McCrae, and Larry Marshall began.
What conversation did you have with Mr. Prince?
The state's key witness was Fred Andrews.
And, he said someone needed to be killed. And he said that man was William Graham.
He testified about Prince and Marshall approaching him about killing Graham and then threatening him after McCrae was arrested.
$20,000.
Thank you. No more questions for this witness, Your Honor.
You may step down.
The jury heard about the two businessmen warning
Counsel,
Andrews
call your
not
next
to
witness.
talk to police about the murder.
No further witnesses at this time, Your Honor.
So noted.
On May 14th, 1991, the local jury convicted Bill Prince and Larry Marshall of accessory before the fact and solicitation of murder. They also found Prince guilty of murder conspiracy, but it wouldn't last. The jury convicted Charles McCrae of burglary and conspiracy. But then, surprisingly, they acquitted him on the murder and arson charges.
You may approach.
Attorneys for the millionaires jumped at the apparent legal contradiction. They argued that since McCrae was acquitted of Graham's murder, their clients should be granted new trials. The judge agreed, overturning the jury's verdict, and released Prince and Marshall on $100,000 bond. The Florence County Solicitor's Office appealed to the state Supreme Court, asking that the guilty verdict stand. After 2 frustrating years of delays, the South Carolina Supreme Court delivered its opinion in December 1993. The court granted Larry Marshall a new separate trial, citing insufficient evidence against him alone, showing intent to have Graham killed. Prosecutors decided not to pursue a new trial. There was more evidence showing Bill Prince actively sought a hitman to kill Graham. To the Supreme Court, Prince did order the murder. Legally, it did not matter who carried it out.
Ultimately, South Carolina Supreme Court upheld Mr. Prince's convictions for conspiracy, for solicitation, and accessory before the fact of murder, which carries a life sentence.
Prince's bond was revoked on August 29, 1994.
Miss Prince.
A team of investigators went to his home to take him into custody. He was to be held to await sentencing.
Okay.
But his wife said he had been gone for days. Agents searched the house but found no sign of him or where he went. Prince's truck was also missing, and investigators learned he had liquidated $190,000 worth of property. He had a head start and plenty of money with which to run and plan his next hit. After being found guilty of murder for hire, South Carolina millionaire Bill Prince jumped bond before sentencing. Days later, a South Carolina state trooper responded to a call about an abandoned vehicle. When he ran the plates, he learned it belonged to the fugitive, Bill Prince. It was sitting by the woods near Lake Santee, South Carolina, on the way to Georgia. 2 major interstates, 95 and 26, intersect in the area. An easy escape in any direction.
Same license plate.
Believing Prince had fled the state, authorities contacted the FBI field office in Columbia, South Carolina. Special Agent Joe Youngener was assigned the case.
The sheriff's office said that they had contacted his friends and his relatives, and they did not know where he was. Once we obtained federally an unlawful flight to avoid confinement warrant, then we started looking for Mr. Prince throughout the United States.
They needed to narrow the scope of the search.
I learned at that time that Bill Prince had a brother, Don Prince, who lived in Wilmington, North Carolina, and was an insurance businessman. And he had taken over some of the business affairs for Bill Prince.
They believed he might also be helping to hide his brother.
We decided not to interview Don Prince because we did not think we would get his cooperation.
Instead, Wilmington agents developed cooperating informants in his neighborhood.
Boy,
morning, sir. This Agent Henderson. I'm Agent Williams with the FBI.
When they knew Don was at work, they interviewed neighbors and explained they were conducting a federal investigation that required discretion.
Yeah, that's my neighbors.
Several recalled seeing Bill Prince with Don and agreed to help.
Well, let me leave the business card with you and ask that you give me a call.
And they knew Don Prince's comings and goings, where he went to work, where he lived, and proceeded to watch this and report to the FBI in Wilmington.
Within days, the plan worked. One neighbor spotted the Prince brothers outside Don's house. As promised, he contacted the FBI.
The Wilmington FBI office notified me that this lookout had actually seen Bill Prince there at the house, at the residence.
You asked me to... Yes. Yeah, they're down in Dijon.
By the time the FBI got the information, he was gone.
The many waterways of Wilmington would provide escape routes few would notice. Agents maintained surveillance on Don Prince, hoping he would lead them to his brother. But catching up with the millionaire fugitive wasn't easy.
Bill Prince was harder to catch than the usual fugitive because he had virtually unlimited resources. Bill Prince and Don Prince were both successful businessmen. They had money, they had cars, they had boats, and they had airplanes. They had offshore contacts, and they moved around. And once Bill Prince was able to solicit his brother's help in hiding him, this caused it to be a more difficult fugitive case. The FBI received information that Bill Prince may be in Puerto Rico, may be in the Bahamas, he may be in Wilmington, North Carolina, he may be in Florida.
Agents responded to every reliable sighting in these areas accessible by boat and small plane. But each time, Bill Prince was gone when they arrived. Soon the FBI learned Bill's brother Don was doing more than hiding him.
We also received information that Don Prince had contacted witnesses who had testified against Bill Prince, trying to get these witnesses to recant their testimony so that Bill Prince could get a new trial.
I'm an associate of Mr. Prince.
An intermediary for the Princes tried to get witness Fred Peachy Andrews to sign an affidavit swearing to new testimony.
Testimony at Mr. Prince's trial might be in your best.
But Andrews had no interest in changing his story.
I don't want to sign anything that has anything to do with any of you guys. You got that?
It really might be in your best interest. You need to take a look at this.
Yeah, I hear you.
His testimony would stand. But Don Prince convinced 20 other witnesses against his brother to sign the affidavits. Andrews was the holdout. By December 1994, Bill Prince had been gone from Atlanta, South Carolina for 4 months. Several times, his people had reached out to Peachy Andrews to get him to recant. Finally, on one chilly December night, someone tried to eliminate him.
Peachy informed the Florence County Sheriff's Office that someone had shot at him at his residence. This was a consequence, we suppose, of him testifying against Bill Prince. However, no one was ever captured, no arrest was ever made.
After the attack on Andrews, Larry Marshall came to the FBI asking for protection, fearing Prince would have him killed. Agents needed to find the fugitive before anyone else in the community got hurt. The FBI developed an informant close to Prince who was afraid to be seen talking to cops. So they slipped him the phone number to a dedicated answering machine at the field office, asking him to leave any tips he had on the machine. In August 1995, the informant called in.
Hey, I got a number for him. It's a pager. 423-555-2769.
The pager's billing address was a motel room in Knoxville, Tennessee. The Knoxville FBI office sent a surveillance team to the motel. They set up outside the room and waited. After several hours, they spotted a man resembling Prince.
He had changed his appearance from the way that we knew Bill Prince. He was wearing a straw hat, he had a suntan, and he had on a casual shirt. And the agents realized that this was the fugitive, Bill Prince. He first said that he was not Bill Prince, but then once they started talking with him, he acknowledged the fact who he was, and they arrested him.
After a year on the run, Bill Prince was finally going to prison. But even prison would not stop his orders for violence. After 52-year-old millionaire fugitive Bill Prince was captured, he was sentenced to life for murder for hire at the Lee Correctional Institution in Bishopville, South Carolina. Bill Prince would not be eligible for parole until he was 72 years old. His brother Don often visited. At the time, the convict was allowed unmonitored visits. Authorities had no idea what the two discussed, what they were planning. They only knew that Bill Prince wanted out and that his attempts to get a new trial had failed. Prince wasn't willing to give up. 2 months into his sentence, he began talking with a fellow inmate about revenge and murder. The inmate said he could orchestrate murders for hire through his contacts on the outside. Prince wanted 5 men killed. Fred Andrews, the main witness against him. Larry Marshall, his former co-defendant. Agent James Gamble, who helped put him away. An elderly man on whom he held life insurance. And even his own son, whom he thought was conspiring with Marshall to take over his fortunes. But Prince made a critical mistake. That inmate was an informant for the FBI. He worked for Special Agent Rob Weisenhofer of the FBI's Columbia, South Carolina field office.
Having informants in the prison system is almost as important as having them out on the street. It's paramount to have as much information coming out of the prison system as we can get, so it's important to maintain good contact inside. And they talk to the other inmates in the institution. A lot of times we'll find out what happens from talking to an inmate source.
The source told Weisenhofer about Prince's request for 5 contract killings.
The story was something that was hard to believe because it was so incredible and something that you'd really see on television or read in the paper, but not really an everyday thing.
Weisenhofer spoke to Special Agent Joe Youngener in Florence to ask about Prince's history.
Joe right away said that all fits with everything that's happened, and I would not doubt that this guy's trying it again.
The informant was scheduled for knee surgery, so the agent met him in the privacy of the infirmary. Weisenhofer was not surprised to hear Bill Prince had his brother's help in the murder-for-hire plots.
Bill Prince was willing to pay a hitman, and the payment would come through his brother, Don Prince.
The informant said the brothers wanted to start by killing Andrews.
We asked the prison informant to play along with Bill Prince because we needed to corroborate what he was telling us. We were concerned that Bill Prince was attempting to find a hitman. We didn't want him to do that before we could intercept him. And so we decided to play the role of the hitman.
The informant would orchestrate the hit on Andrews, then arrange a meeting between the fake hitman and Don Prince, where they could complete the payoff and plan the other murders.
Just on this.
Agents from SLED and the FBI prepared for the sting. Bill Prince was just as dangerous inside the prison walls as he had been outside, as long as Don Prince was out there willing to do anything to help his brother.
Bill Prince and his brother Don Prince.
Investigators needed to stop the two by securing clear evidence of a murder conspiracy. According to SLED agent Billy Chastain,
Bill and Don Prince were not only brothers, they were true partners in crime. We needed to build a case not only against Bill Prince, but against his brother, who was not incarcerated and had never been incarcerated for any serious crime before. And we felt like we had to tie the two in a conspiracy to make it work.
the informant met with Prince and told him he had found a man for the job.
He said that the hitman was a member of a motorcycle gang and that for $5,000 the hitman would kill Peachy Andrews, and Bill Prince took him up on the offer.
The informant said he only needed to know where Andrews lived.
Bill actually drew a map for the informant. We then had that map mailed to us by the informant. When we checked it, it was real.
The map led agents directly to Fred Andrews' house. More circumstantial evidence of the brothers' conspiracy.
Mr. Andrews, FBI.
The agents met with Andrews and told him about the hit ordered against him.
No, sir. We don't have time.
They offered Andrews protection
Then send me back.
and requested his help with the sting operation.
We needed something that would spur a conversation between the informant and Bill Prince, and we decided that the way to do that would be to tell Bill that the hit had taken place.
Andrews agreed to help provide proof he had been killed. Agents staged a photograph of Andrews as the apparent victim of an execution. They would get the photo to Bill Prince with the story that the hitman took it after the murder. Then Andrews would go into hiding, further supporting the story of his death. At the prison infirmary, agents gave the photo to their informant. They also wired him for his meeting with Prince. They wanted to get Prince on tape, making arrangements to pay the hitman through his brother. So far, they had very little incriminating Don Prince.
We had to prove to Bill that the murder had indeed taken place so he can pass that along to his brother, who was really the hidden man in this whole deal, because he was slick and he always worked under the table.
The informant met with Bill in the prison yard, handing off the staged murder photo. But there was a problem. Prince said he did not believe it was Peachy Andrews in the photo, claiming his beard looked different.
Yeah, what that? I can't see what it is. That's what that looks like.
One more complication in a frustrating case. South Carolina investigators faked the contract killing of government witness Fred Peachy Andrews, trying to catch brothers Bill and Don Prince in the first of 5 murder-for-hire plots.
Wasn't enough.
A prison informant showed Bill Prince the picture of the hit, but reported to agents that Prince did not believe it was Andrews in the photo. Special Agent Rob Weisenhofer had to convince Prince and get it on tape.
Bill Prince had asked several questions. One, what type of ring was Peachy Andrews wearing, and what did the tags on his car say?
Let's do it again.
Agents gave the informant the details he needed and sent him back to meet with Prince. The informant told Prince he just spoke with the hitman by telephone. He gave him the information requested about the ring and the license plate.
Ring drives a blue Oldsmobile, license plate NEB 531.
Prince was still skeptical. He told the informant he needed more to be convinced.
Oh. Another day in paradise. What's more proof?
Frustrated, Special Agent Joe Youngener decided to add one more ruse to the investigation and planted a rumor that might help.
Joe Youngener over in Florence mentioned to a newspaper reporter there that he should check the police impound lot in Florence County. When the reporter went by the impound lot, he noticed Peachy Andrews' car was there. Mr. Andrews is sort of a local character, and that car was well known around Florence. So when the reporter saw that car, he put two and two together and realized that that Peachy Andrews, who had been an important witness in the Bill Prince trial, was missing.
Conducting interviews, the reporter learned Fred Andrews had not been seen for over a week, and people were beginning to talk that something had happened to him. What he did not know was that Andrews was holed up in an FBI safe house. On December 14th, 1995, the reporter published a story about Andrews' disappearance. When Don Prince read the column, he brought it to his brother Bill.
They were huddled together in the meeting room, and it was apparent they didn't want anyone else to hear what was going on.
It looked like Bill Prince was finally convinced that Andrews had been murdered.
Thank you. See you later.
Now he would set up the payoff through the prison informant in a conversation taped by the FBI.
Don Prince left the institution and traveled on I-20 to a rest area about 65, 70 miles from Lee Correctional Institute, where he was told to look for a biker-type individual at the picnic area.
That biker type was, in fact, a sled agent.
We had placed the undercover agent out at a table by himself so he'd be away from any traffic. We weren't sure how Don Prince was going to react when he was arrested, and we'd heard he always carried a gun.
Other agents watched from nearby to videotape the meeting and make the arrest. The rendezvous time was 5 p.m. The prearranged code was for Don Prince to ask directions to Turbeville, a town across the state. At 5:20, the subject pulled up.
Don Prince walked down and asked him where was Turbeville.
Must be done.
Special Agent Weisenhofer posed as a motorist using the telephone.
It's all there.
Agent Chastain and the others prepared to move on his signal.
Our code was when Special Agent Weisenhofer dropped the phone, then everybody would approach Mr. Prince.
The undercover agent said he was ready to do the next hit against Larry Marshall. But Prince said they wanted to wait until things cooled down.
We'll be in touch.
Special Agent Weisenhofer dropped the phone and confronted Prince. As I arrived, Don Prince put his hands up initially and put his left hand toward his pocket. And at that time, I brought him down to the ground, and then we effected the arrest.
Come on, buddy. Come back here. Come on, man.
After we arrested Don Prince and put him in handcuffs, we picked him up off the ground, and as I was bringing him up off the ground, he said the things you do for your brother, and was coming to the realization of what had happened to him at that point.
Agents recovered Don's gun from his car. His brother Bill was expecting to hear the payoff had taken place, but instead would soon learn Don had been arrested, and their days of ordering contract killings were over.
The Prince brothers are the most vicious individuals that I've ever been around. Bill and Don Prince are cold-hearted murderers in our eyes, and obviously in the court's eyes too.
Bill Prince, already serving a life sentence, was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to an additional 22 years in federal prison. His brother Don was sentenced to 17.5 years for his role in the murder-for-hire plot.
It was a huge team effort between SLED and the FBI, and we were actually able to save some lives. But it's really gratifying when you realize at the end of the day that people probably would have been killed if we weren't there.
Bill Prince was moved to administrative segregation. No more unmonitored visits. No more murder plots.